early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Let's look at the MPC meeting, which is the Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, it has held its third MPC meeting for the year 2024. Started yesterday and then today. But there are speculations around what the outcome of that meeting will be. But just for you to know, of course, it will major on inflation control, but we don't know what the MPR, which is the monetary policy rate, will be at the end of the day. To talk about this with us, we have our in-house analyst, Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze, who is in the studio this morning. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good Nigeria, Lagos.
Good Nigeria to you too.
I love that song. Great.
All right, so going in the line of building a good Nigeria, the country has been battling inflation for quite a while, and the CBN has been doing all it can to ensure that the inflation rate comes down. So it's been tightening MPR. So this is the third MPC meeting for the year 2024. What the outcome would be is still being speculated, but what do you see the CBN coming up with at the end of the meeting regarding the MPR?
Well, I think the CBN needs to be really very careful in terms of reading the situations that's really driving the inflation indices in Nigeria. That there are a lot of assumptions out there in the public space. I read somewhere yesterday, and somebody was doing analysis and said, "Oh, the tightening has been working," and I think that we should be able to situate what worked in context. If you look at the figures as they've been coming, and somewhere in March, some abracadabra happened when, of course, there was a clampdown on BDCs and the rest of it, which, of course, temporarily forced down the value of the dollar to the Naira. So that, of course, are reflected in the figure that we see as if the inflation is going down. And what does that tell me as a person is that what is fundamental to the inflation in Nigeria has nothing to do with the excess money in circulation. And I think this must be very clear to the CBN governor and the members of that committee, that we are not having inflation because there's so much money in the circulation, and therefore we need to pull the money out of circulation. What is fueling the inflation in Nigeria or driving the prices in Nigeria is the exchange rate. So if there's anything that needs to be managed, is that exchange rate. How do we drive it down or get it stable so that prices will be stable? Now, a lot of people are speculating, because CBN say, we have gotten hold of some more money, we're going to increase, people are speculating, they are likely to increase the MPR with about 100 basis points, which move it from 24.7 to about 25.4% lending rate. What that does for our economy is further cripple it. And I think that must be very clear. And I think it is better to leave it at where it is, really, just like the US did recently, without troubling the water, because increasing it will further really heighten the pressure that is on the Naira, and that will not be good even for the things that we are trying to manage.
All right, just like what you said, maybe that will make us to revisit the last decision taken by the MPC as regards the last meeting, which was held in March. As at that time, the lending rate was increased from 22.75 to 24.75. Would you say a few months down the line, that's like 2 months, or roughly 2 months now, you have the inflation to still be at about 3%? Will you say that decision has actually made any impact on the economy? And if not, what were the things that went wrong? And what are the lessons now that we're expecting another outcome from this meeting, which will determine the next phase for the economy?
You see, for me, that's why I speak to reading the context very well. You see, it's easy for us to always recall to what other people have done in similar cases. I argued somewhere yesterday to say, look, we don't need to just this Robin Hood kind of economics and take from textbook, and then of course we start to say, okay, if it goes like this, it just goes like this. And I don't think economy work that way anymore. We have to look at our peculiarity as a people and look at the things that are fueling inflation. Take, for example, one of the key elements in the indices is the food inflation, which is always very high. Why is food inflation high? What government needs to do about this is the fact that, number one, you have a lot of people, especially in the middle belt and in the northwest and northeast, who can't go to farm because of insecurity. You have tales of bad road, which increases the logistics of moving even the little available food from the rural to the urban center. So what happened is that once this food item comes to the city, the person who is transporting it, he has to factor in the cost of logistics. And you know, when you have excessive demand and supply is few, of course, price will be driven up. So this is a problem. We are not producing enough for the economy. And if we have to produce enough, which means we must find a way to empower smallholder farmers to get access to loans to be able to drive their Greek business. In the 21st century, we are still using cutlass and hoe to do farm in Nigeria, which has ended in Europe in the 16th century. So we must understand the context in which we are managing the monetary policy of the country. So when you increase the lending rate, what happens? You are increasing the cost of the borrower. And that cost will be transferred to the end user or the final consumer. Is it bringing costs down or increasing more costs? So it will get costs up. So we are not in inflation because there's too much money in circulation. I think that must be very clear to MPC. So when you're saying what's the impact? There's no impact. The only impact we felt is the fact that at a certain point between March and sometime in April, the dollar rate dropped. And that had impact on the prices of goods. It's not because the lending rate was increased. Now that the dollar is also climbing up, what are you seeing? Prices are also going up in the same direction. So we must understand what is triggering the prices. It's not that because there's so much money in the hands of Nigeria now, they are now looking for what to buy, and that's what this. A lot of people have not even this money in their hand. And when we even look at I think CBN also should look at the books of the commercial bank, for example. Even the development bank can see who they are borrowing money to. And the money is not in the hands of the common man. The money are in the hand of the elite. So these are the realities that are before us. And not put theories on the ground to determine, oh, when we increase lending rate, then we'll be able to mop up money in circulation. And I don't think that the money is in there. People go to ATM today, you can't still get the Naira note.
And that's why they go to POS.
All right. So
because POS are recycling what drivers are aggregating, what is moving around. If you get driver do today, they sell the money to the POS operator. If you see those who are selling along the road, they sell cash, they sell to POS operator, and they recycle it. So they are only recycling the little money that is in circulation, and that is what it is. So that's why it's not getting to the bank. Because the POS operator are buying them off. If a rice seller today sell, the POS go there to go and buy. Because CBN has no money, and the commercial bank has no money in their ATM machine. So it is easier for POS to buy from local vendors. So I think that those who are in this committee should enter into the street and understand the reality of our economy before really sitting down to take a decision of whether to increase rates or to allow it to remain where it is.
All right, talking about increasing rates, the cash reserve ratio was also increased to 50% at the last MPC meeting. What it will be now at the end of this one is yet to be known. But looking at the increase of the cash reserve ratio to 50%, do you see that decision as something that's also helped the banks in their activities?
You see, it's same instruments that you're using. And you know, the last regime says, oh, what is it that the money that the bank can hold, let it be 40% and 60% you give out as loan to people so that the money can circulate. Now, so what the new CBN government say, oh, that figure is too much, let's reduce it by more 10% so that I don't need to give out more loan. That's what we're saying. But the economy needs oiling. It needs more money. That is what they must realize, that we need more money in the circulation so that people can be able to do business. Banks don't invest because all commercial activity here is all wire around deductions. And so that's the lazy way to do banking. You are not seeing bank investing in critical infrastructure. You are not seeing bank investing in agriculture. You are not seeing bank investing in industrial sector, where they are actually mopping up and making real more profits. You go and check all the profit declared. You see, they are all through electronic transactions. That is going on, because if you transfer money, they take money. If you receive money, they take money. If you do this, they are collecting all manners of money. And that's why the only industry that is profiting today is actually the bank. The industrial sectors are suffering losses. Telcos are operating in losses. The only one that is making profit is the bank. Why? Because the bank just sit down, whether they work or they don't work, money come. So this is a problem. So as people are putting money into the bank, what we're looking at is they say, you are saying that people have access to money. There's a lot of people who want to do business. Who can actually do a business and make a 24% profit on that business? To be realistic. Is there a business you will do in Nigeria today that at the end of the business, you will make a profit of 24%? I'm not sure. And I'm not sure there's anywhere in the world that happens. So if we can't make a 24% profit, so where will you get the 24%?
Almost 25%.
Almost 25% interest on the loan. Because you are supposed to be servicing the loan from the profit you make. So which business are you going to do in Nigeria today? And I think this is what, they are common sense economists. We don't need any textbook. We don't need any Oxford trained professor to think about this. Is to look at it. What kind of a business would a man invest in Nigeria today and then is able to make a 24% profit? So that when you make that profit, you can now take the whole and give to the bank. These are the issues that are before us, and I think this is where we need to listen to some voice of reason. I listened to a little clip the other day, and this American senator was saying that the bigger problem in Africa is the fact that we are trying hard to prove to the white man that we are a credible debtors. And I don't think that should be what we should be doing.
All right. You talked about something that is quite crucial. You said common sense should make anyone know that if you cannot make the percentage of profit from what the business you do, then it becomes impossible to service the loan that's given to you at a certain percentage. All right, let's look at the economic principles that is being applied to some economic challenges. Now, when inflation goes up, many countries around the world, in bid to control it, apply the principle of tightening MPR, which is tightening monetary policy rate. Are some of these principles becoming myths that do not actually represent or conform with the reality? Is there a need to review them in line with current realities?
Yeah, I think we must also understand the dynamism that is in our world, that the world changes. A whole lot of things change. At the time these theories were being propounded, the world was not as complex as it is today. And when you are defining inflation, that you have too much money chasing too few goods. And so what you do with tightening is to reduce the money, to create the balance. So that's the assumption of that theory. So if you have too much money in circulation, whether it is cost push or demand push, whichever, then what you do, you withdraw some money from circulation or from the hand of the people by either increasing your tax or increasing your lending rate. So we take more money from the hand of those who have it. So if somebody is asking you today, we have a scenario of cost push inflation. Now, what is responsible for the cost that is pushing the inflation? That's the question we need to ask. We are an import-dependent economy. Almost everything here we bring from the outside and we buy with dollar. So there is huge pressure on the dollar to the Naira. So this pressure on the dollar to Naira is what is driving prices up. Now, if you want to stabilize prices, what do? You stabilize the exchange rate. Now we are floating the exchange rate that it should float naturally. Now, how will you float an exchange rate when you don't have anything to sell? So look at your balance of trade, your import versus your export. You see your import like this, and this is your export.
So there's a deficit.
There's a deficit. So what do? You need to show up your import to bridge that gap. So which means if you are selling more goods outside, then you are going to receive more foreign exchange, and then you have enough for the one to import whatever thing you want to bring from the outside. We are not working hard to see what we can be exporting. Now we are putting monetary policies that are killing companies, that is killing productivity, and we are thinking that we are doing the economy any good. It can't work. So we must look at the peculiarity of our situation. There's no ground theory anywhere in the world that explains any situation. Even social scientists are still looking for ground theories that can explain every natural occurrence. But as of today, there's no one that is found. And therefore, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to economic issues. What nations do is look at their peculiarities and see, how do we encourage productivity? We can be competitive because if you go to Europe, where their lending rate is a digit, and you here, you are having 2 digits, how do you compete? Like what Philip Cotter tells us in his competitive advantage. There are only 3 ways to compete. It's either you are competing on cost, you are competing on differentiation, or you are competing on focus. Now, where are we going to focus? Where's the differentiation? We don't have the cost. You bring in rice from Thailand through the black market from the porous border. It's still cheaper than the one that is packaged in Nigeria here. So how do you export your rice? So I think that's where a lot of people were thinking at the beginning of this regime, that there need to be a synergy between the fiscal and the monetary policy so that we can actually get to a point where we, as a people, can begin to think, what's our problem and how do we solve it? If you go to the market, if it is tomato season and you are in my 12, you can buy a basket of tomato for 20,000. But when it's off season, in the same market, you are paying 45,000. What's responsible? Because the production is seasonal. Now, what should we do to be able to level the prices and make it stable? Then it's producing all through the year. So, which means, of course, we must be investing either in irrigation to be able to do all year round farming, to ensure that there's stability of prices. And I think this is where our managers of economy really need to put on the common sense card.
Now, let's look at the options before NPC, as we await the outcome of the meeting. It started yesterday and it's going to be wrapped up today. Now, let's look at the options before them. In my opinion, if you ask me, I think there are three options. The first one is to further tighten the lending rate. The second option is to leave it the way it is. And then the third option may be to reduce it, which is not likely. So let's look at these options before the MPC and what would be the implication of these decisions if they are taken in few hours.
Well, I feel it is safer to maintain the status quo so that you can take a further reading of the situations and the scenarios. Because there's a whole lot of things that are playing out all at the same time. The petrol price, energy price, all in short, the energy price was increased by well over 300% in some cases. So where you were paying 52 Naira per unit, now you are made to pay 225 Naira per unit. That is coming into the cost of production. Further eating deep into the capital, not even profit, because the macroeconomic environment does not even permit profit at the moment. So, if you're relying on public electricity to do any form of production, you can see what scale it is. Diesel is selling in some places 1,205, 1,050, depending on where you're buying. And that's why you are seeing a lot of queue on the NNPC, because they seem to be selling cheaper than most of the independent marketers. Now, all these are adding up and worsening the situation of inflation. Because the man who is selling, you see, because when we are using the grammar, is what we're talking about is that the prices of goods and services are increasing a bit. That's what we're talking about. That's what inflation is all about. Now, when you're going to charge, because the regime of the new energy tariff increase started in April, you wait for the figure for April inflation and see what it's going to look like. It's going to be on the rooftop. So that's not because there's so much money, but it's because, of course, you're already taking money from the hand of people who already don't have. There's nobody you will go to today who is not crying about electricity. In a 2-room apartment, people are spending up to like 60,000 monthly for just bulb, TV, and a fridge. It's as expensive as that. Now, you imagine for a local barber. Imagine it for a small SME. So this is the issues on the ground that we need to study holistically before we take the decision whether we're going to go down or we're going to go up. There are so much taxes that is going on the system which we don't account for, especially the informal taxes, which are collected by area fathers and area boys. Nobody factored this into any calculation. And it's huge. If you have ever used public transportation, you see a driver, for example, who takes a passenger, if he misses 4 or 5 bus stops on his route, at every bus stop is dropping. And that money is going into the hand of the private individual who is already overtaxed. So when people say, oh, Nigerians don't pay tax, sometimes I argue, is it really true? Or is that we are paying tax to the wrong people? Because government seems not to have control over the society. And so there are a lot of people who are taking things on behalf of government. And they are even more powerful than the government as it were. So these are the issues that faces us. So for me, it is better to play safe, and that's what the US did. And say, well, yes, though inflation was going down, and they decided to say, let's maintain it and look at it for a period of time and see what will play out. But for me, what CBN need to do in the long run is that we must get to that point where we have to tell ourselves very honest truths. Only bank cannot exist in society. Because the only interface in our society today is government and the banks. Government sell a product, pay salary, the salary comes through the bank, and the bank takes charges from it. We are still heavily unbanked. CBN should do audit on the bank, for example. How many Nigerians, even those who are working, that you pay salary in their account, and 50% of that salary is retained after 1 month?
Retained as savings? Or...
As savings, yeah. So these are the issues. These are the things that we need to confront. So for me, in the longer run, it's actually winding down. That Nigeria need to get to the state of Europe where we are doing a single digit. Even if it's going to be 7%, 9% on investment, then of course, that is the risk level that the economy can tolerate. Borrowing or lending to businesses at 24% is a suicide mission.
Talking about borrowing or even lending. Now, the president launched in April the consumer credit scheme. The first phase is to begin with civil servants and then to move to members of the general public. Do you see this as the policies are not in sync from the presidency to the CBN? While the CBN is tightening NPR, the presidency is pushing for a credit economy. What should be the place for place of convergence in this?
Well, it's access. There's no conflict, so to speak. Yeah, of course, what you are doing, you are giving people more credit, but the credit is coming at a rate. I was trying a bank app recently, and I said, okay, I want to take salary advance as loan. They call it quick loan. So if I take 40,000, I pay 6,800 in 1 month. What's that percentage in mathematics? That's 8% in 1 month. So if you cumulate it in 1 year, 8 times 12. So this is the situation. Yes, consumer credit. Who is going to go and sign up that credit? Nobody will take it because it's too expensive. It's expensive. So the credit will not work. In places where they are doing consumer credit in Europe, interest rate is between 5 and 7%. So people can afford it. So if you take 40,000, at least you can afford to pay 40 Naira or something. But when you are taking loan at that exorbitant price per month, you can imagine what you are getting. Look at the other time. Some Asian economy were actually doing negative interest rate. Japan was -1. So how do I compete with a businessman from Japan in a global economy? Why won't smuggling still be happening? There's no number. If you put the 250 million Nigerians around our border, smuggling will still happen. Because of this hostile economic environment. These are the things that the regime must look into critically to see how do we ensure that the cost of loan become cheaper, company make more profit, then we can collect more taxes and get more people employed. This is the way to go, in my own view.
All right. Primarily, the role of the CBN is to oversee monetary policy.
Yeah.
And there was something significant the CBN did between March and April, which was to clamp down on BDCs as regards, the exchange rate and all that. And we had a situation where the exchange rate was, was better. But as we speak now, the reverse is the case now. One, we agree that yet on the part of CBN, it should be like a short-term thing when it comes to monetary policy intervention. But now let's look at it on the long run. Since the exchange rate influences the nature of the Nigerian economy, what should be done in the long term to ensure that this is sustained? We had a situation in April where Naira was one of the best performing currencies in the world. And now we're yet to sustain it. With what
It has become the worst now.
with what is playing out now, what should be done by the CBN to sustain this in the long run? We know ideally it should be a short-term intervention, but in the long run, as a country, how do we sustain this path whereby the Nigerian economy experiences the right growth needed as at this season?
I must be very honest with you. I don't think there's any magic wand that the CBN can use to work on the exchange rate. There are BDCs everywhere in the world. In short, there are more BDCs in the UAE than you have even banks. Every street has their BDC selling. But for all I know, in the UAE, in the past how many years, the rate is the same. Why? Because business is going out, business is coming in. There's influx of FS in the economy. Apart from diaspora remittances, you look at it now, where will the influx coming from? We have sold crude in advance. We have received the money some years back. So you are not getting inflow from that source, except for the few export commodities that we're doing. So this is where we need to see that this is not just a CBN problem alone, but CBN cannot be tightening when the economy is bleeding. You can imagine somebody is losing blood and then you are choking the person's neck. You just want the person to die. That's what it means. This is where CBN need to sit down with the fiscal agents and look at the macroeconomic space and see what are the real issues. Number one, young people are not taken to agriculture, where we should have had a comparative cost advantage, because it is not attractive. Because we have not been able to graduate from the whole and cutlass farm. Two, companies are not doing well and people are not getting jobs. So companies are not employing. And we are not seeing new companies spring up. Even the ones that are struggling, they are not making profits. So the possibility of expansion is limited. So productivity is a long-run solution to our problem. That when we become productive, that we can, of course, do trade with other nations, so that we can also sell rice to maybe a neighboring country at competitive price. Because if you go to anywhere outside of your country where you don't have authority to either use tariff or excise duty to manipulate pricing, your product and other people's product will be at the same place. Now, if in terms of quality you are not matching, you will lose out. If in terms of pricing you are not matching, you will lose out. So how do we gain access to global market? These are the things that we must be thinking. And this is why I think, really, where, of course, even CBN need to watch out is also speak to Mr. President that all this money we are throwing around in the name of social welfare, they are not helping the system. They won't help the system. Let's see how we can channel this money into productive ventures, where we can group people into communities to do business, to do farming, and produce. And then we have excess in the market all year round, and then we can even export. Let's invest in the value chain or the supply chain of agricultural materials. Let government invest in logistics development. The roads are better now. We have trains that are running. So we even have local cargo that is cheap enough to take food from one part of the country to the other. And once all these things are put in place and they are run profitably, then you will see the economy will be working well. But as we speak now, where you have every agency of government, their focus is revenue generation, it will be very difficult for you to manage that economy. Even those that are supposed to be social service now are seeking more money. You know, recently we talked about the toll, that even the president was going to be paying toll gate. And I really asked myself, what is the essence for toll gate? Go to the road that leads to International Airport, apart from the one that Lagos State did. The back road that looking at it, go and check it. With all the money that has been paid in that toll gate, it cannot even sanfill the road. Every vehicle that passes there, if you're a car, you pay 300 naira. If you are a SUV, you pay 500 naira on a daily basis. How is it impacting on the maintenance of the road in that facility? These are questions that we need to ask. So it's not about driving more revenue. Because when you are taking more money from the people, by all means, you are creating a social disorder. And that is what we are seeing right now.
Talking about taking money from people, recently the charge that was to be introduced, the cybersecurity levy, was halted. But there are other levies and other charges that makes cost of transaction expensive. Now, in part of your submission a while ago, you talked about banks not investing or having investments in Nigeria other than deductions from which they make their profits. What kind of investments can the banks go into? And even the banks, do they have enough to go into investments? Recall that the CBN has asked for a consolidation of some of these banks.
Yeah, but that's what we're talking about. If a bank can make a profit of 90 billion in a quarter, and you say the bank don't have money, they do. So what I'm saying is that there's a need for bank to also enter into joint ventures with other people and oversee that these businesses are running and creating more wealth for society. What we should be looking at is, how do we create more wealth? What we currently do today, and that's the point, you can take the books. Every bank has submitted the audited reports. Go and check where the profit is coming from. Loan repayment is not working because a lot of people who take the loan, they can't pay back, and that is real. It's not because they don't want to pay back. Some people who genuinely want to pay back, they are not making profit enough to be able to pay back because the rate is horrible, to say the least. So if you are loaning money to somebody at 24%, that's what I'm arguing. How can that person make profit of 24%? Even in international transactions, what do we have? It is margin is usually between 20-25%, isn't that? In international contract. So which means if I'm doing a contract with you, internationally speaking, we are expected that we make a profit of between 20 and 25% on the margin. What business will somebody do in Nigeria that you can think that if he invests 10 million, the person is able to make 20 million, which is 100%. Then he will be able to pay staff salary, pay electricity, then pay taxes to government, and then will still be able to refund loan to the bank. It cannot happen. So that's why I'm talking about common sense economists, not textbook economists.
All right, we don't know the kind of cap that those at the MPC meeting are wearing right now, but we do hope that is the right kind of cap that will come up with decisions that will be economically friendly at the end of the day. Thank you so much, Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze. Maybe I need to get my designer to make me that common sense cap.
I think all of us need to wear it. It's quite important. This kind of time that we are is really tough times, and like they say, tough people, they are the one that last.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.